Everybody listen to We're Not Wizards, because we are the best, and we're not wizards, no matter what anybody says. Goodbye.
Hello and welcome to another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for May. May you have a good time. Now, right, a little while ago, we had a guy called Cesar. And Cesar, he's got a little company. Well, it's become a bigger company called Alleycat Games. And he did like a chocolate factory game, which was quite good and was quite wonderful. The person who's responsible for helping rotting the board gaming teeth is a gentleman by the name of Matthew Dunstan. And he's here to talk about Chocolate Factory. He's here to talk about being involved in various states of design and stuff like that. And we're here just to have a conversation potentially about saving the planet, wearing a greeny blue wig.
Yeah, anything is possible.
Anything, as Thunderbird said, anything can happen in the next half hour. How are you, sir? Are you well?
So buckle in.
Buckle in.
I'm well. Thanks for having me on, Richard. It's been that's quite an introduction. Actually, I knew Cesar even before Alleycat Games started. He used to come along to the Cambridge playtest meetup, and. He was showing off his Lab Wars game.
Yes.
And we were sort of working on it. So
that was a
so it's been great to see him go all that way. Yeah, exactly.
I suppose we better say hello to everybody who's out there, and hello to everybody who's out there. The reason that we do this is quite simple.
Hello.
Is because we like speaking to people, and we've done about 270 of these things, and the intention is to try and.
I know, you're prolific.
Trying to speak to as many people as possible before I get kind of stopped forever, or I just turn around and say, I've had enough, I'm finished, I've done, I've spoken to everybody, there's nobody else worth speaking to. And the other reason it is because, as I say, Cesar was on the show to talk about Chocolate Factory a while ago, and this young man, he was meant to be on as well, but for whatever reason, he says, I've listened to the show, I'm definitely not coming on. But then I kind of guilted him into coming on the show anyway, so he's turned up. He's under a bit of duress, but he's here to talk about himself, so it should be okay. But we never know. So there you go.
I don't know what really to say to that, but I'm quite happy to be here. Let the record state that I don't fully remember the reason that I didn't come on last time. I don't think it was for any.
I don't think it was any.
No,
I think it was probably a timing thing. I think actually I had to move the time either backwards or forwards by a certain period of time, and I think you guys were in a bit of a kind of a mad playtesting thing for. I think it was potentially for Chocolate Factory. You were going through various different things, and yeah.
Yeah, we did add some new content in during the campaign, which we had to kind of quickly put together. So yeah, it was
and I can't complain anyway. I mean, it's not like I'm the only podcaster that's out there. I mean, I was checking today. There's literally like thousands of us now. You know, the board game podcast is something that everybody is doing. So it's not like we're I'm surprised there's more podcasters out there than people that are actually playing games. Who knew? But there you go.
Well, I'm behind the behind the eight ball because I just started a blog. I'm 10 years ago, so or sort of restarted a new project. But Yeah, because everyone's in the podcast space, so I thought I'd try something different. So anyway,
I was just sick of going to iTunes and just seeing the top 100 stuff is all to do with like board games. Has decided to do something so slightly different kind of instead. One of the things we like to do is we like to find out about how people got involved in the hobby, so we can have a little look at the recipe of the past before we stare maybe at maybe the chocolate bar of the present, and then we look at the sore tummy of the future. So you want to tell us how you kind of got involved in the industry, in the hobby?
I played games when I was younger, more traditional kind of games in Australia, and I did play sort of Settlers of Catan and things like that when I was, I don't know, 10 or 12 or something like that. So I had some exposure to some more modern sort of games, but I didn't really play a lot of games. When I went to university in Australia, I started to play a few more board games. I went along to a few clubs, but I think it was 2010 where I really, that year seems to be the year I sort of maybe got serious about board games being part of my life, I guess, because I, joined Board Game Geek and I started going to, playing every week and before long. And the thing that's a bit hazy is why I decided to become a designer. I don't really exactly know. I think I probably just thought, why not? Or, I'd had ideas and thought I would sort of try them out. So,
wait, are you the type of person that tinkers away at stuff? I mean, because we had a chat beforehand.
Not really, though.
We had a chat beforehand, and you're a bit of a scientist. So if you got you're like a scientist with an imagination, do you like to know how kind of like things kind of work, kind of thing?
I guess that probably is true. I do often think there are very close parallels between scientific research and making games. I always think of games as experiments. When you make a new prototype, you're sort of, and when you're testing, you're just performing an experiment, and you'll hopefully observe what happens and then use that to gain some sort of insight to the system you're creating, and of course in science that system is reality that you're trying to get some insight into. So I definitely think there's parallels, but I guess maybe that's it. Maybe there's something about being a scientist means that you're always interested in what constitutes the whole, and you like looking under the hood. I probably wasn't. Yeah, I was probably quite mechanically motivated, I would say. I wasn't, I think a lot of first games or first designs seem to fall into one or two camps. Someone either has something that's incredibly thematic because that's what they want to play, or they have a favorite movie or book or whatever, and they want to somehow, live that experience or pay homage to it. Or other people, more like myself, there's something about how a game works or some mechanism. And of course, when you get on in design, there it's not one or the other. But I feel like when you start out, you have to be driven by something, because you haven't something has to keep you going. And whether it's that sort of tinkering or whether it's some sort of thematic experience, because all the games I made initially, they weren't thematic at all, really. I wouldn't say so. I mean, they had some sort of placeholder, but they weren't any great thematic romp.
I mean, you've been
they weren't much of a romp at all, I guess.
But you have been kind of fairly prolific, though. I mean, you're not the guy that's kind of done kind of one or two games, and then that's kind of it. Do you get kind of pleasure out of inventing systems then? I mean, are you the type of
I think
the type of person who says, right, okay, if we tie this in, so we're moving this here, so this creates this, so this creates that, and that's cool, that's an entire game kind of thing. Or what I can do is I can tie 3 or 4 of these systems together and have that as a kind of a bigger kind of game.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. I think I definitely do. I mean, for me, I think I like when you can find one system or one mechanical novelty that somehow gives you the whole game or most of the game.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something, I mean, the word elegance gets thrown around a lot, but when I think about design elegance, it's when one novelty serves so many different purposes. It serves as being interactive, it serves as giving progression, it serves as something tactile, it serves as competition. I mean, one example that comes to mind is something like from Hansa Teutonica, which is one of my favorite games. You know, the way they use a cube, essentially, which is going to sound completely ridiculous, but the number of ways they use that one piece that Andreas Sterling uses in the game to mean so many different things. It's something that the way that you pay to fight your opponents, it's the way that you block them, it's the way that you show progression towards a goal. It shows some form of engine building when you remove them from your board and improve various actions, their currency, and it's all through this one component and one system, which I find really the pinnacle of design for me in a way.
Yeah. I mean, to me, elegance is basically the game almost plays itself and naturally does things that you kind of expect it to do and follows a certain kind of set of rules that seem almost like natural. You know, that even, you know, if it was an animal, that would be the direction it would kind of go. So the systems, there's no point the system kind of feels out of place, that you're kind of going, oh, I didn't think that would turn into that. I thought that would naturally double up or use this, or then I would be able to add this kind of additional resource. I think, to me, you know, a very, very complicated game can still be elegant because of the way everything kind of naturally kind of flows together, and you never feel you're having to double check the rule book. Do you know what I mean? Is that it's almost like it's a kind of a natural thing. And at the same time, I've seen other games that are very, very clunky, and they don't make it's not a case of they kind of make logical sense because you can kind of see where the system has come into place, but they don't necessarily make they're not really gamified or they've not been assessed maybe for their playability in terms of, to a gamer, they're kind of what they would naturally kind of expect, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I think it's something that's as we enter an era where people play games less and that you need more, they're sort of less forgiving and they might not play a game too many times. You need to really remove those clunky things, as you say, those things that kind of get in the way of an experience or are exceptions, or that things that don't make sense. And I think the games that succeed at that will have the best chance of doing well, because people can really, they can feel comfortable exploring something even if it's new, because it somehow makes some sort of rational sense. A big one I've been for example, I went to visit Tony Boydell last weekend.
Oh yeah,
of Snowdonia fame. So we're designing one or two things together. And it's interesting, we're sort of working on it's an interesting sort of like little sort of building game that's card driven, because we both really like sort of variable power cards and things like that. And even through that really quite early process, I think something that I've been really concerned about is trying to not have too many sort of extrinsic rules or extrinsic restrictions. I think there's a lot of games that sort of give you they require a lot of sort of overhead space in your brain for you to play them. You have to understand a lot of things to even play, to even make a move. They don't arise naturally from the mechanics or from the components or the abilities. And I think that's always something for me that I don't like, when you have to have, especially even when you have to have like a rule, like a reference card or something. Like, I think that's almost a sign sometimes that you've got too many. There's too much stuff that you have to sort of put on the players that they have to understand to even start playing the game, rather than having it kind of emerge as they play what's possible. That the components should suggest what you can do, rather than you have to remember what you can do with the components. I mean, that's not always possible. I mean, it depends on the game, but it's something to think. I think that's worth thinking about.
When you're working on stuff, do you work on systems and then tie them together then? Do you have like kind of brainstorming sessions where you think of mechanics that then you can incorporate into a game? Because you sound kind of like, again, it's kind of going back to the analytical mind. You sound to me like the type of person to say, well, if we could have this kind of card drafting thing, this would be cool if I could do this, and then if I could work in some cubes to play on the cards, and then if I could have a dice thing here, then this would all marry up together and that would be cool. But what kind of theme are we going to bring in to kind of make this kind of work?
Yeah, I think you've got it right on the head, actually, or at least I have a whole notebooks and things on my computer where I often will think about it's usually not sometimes it's a single mechanism, but sometimes it's also even just a round structure or something. It's like, what would you do on your turn? What are the choices available to you? How can you have some system or some components that will do all this work for you in different ways? And you're exactly right about I've been, I've really wanted to try and get back to trying to make card games, sort of strategic card games, a bit like Elysium, because they're a type of game I really enjoy. And I realize I haven't really made one for a while. And a lot of that is thinking about, okay, if I stack the cards like this, and if I have 5 types, and maybe a type can trigger this, or it could do that, and there's sort of multi-use cards and things. So I guess that's probably, I think I do think about that. But the only other thing now that has really, I feel, with something like the success of Wingspan, has sort of added a new thing to consider when I'm doing all that brainstorming. And actually, I think it means I leave behind a lot more ideas. Like, I don't go forward with ideas as there's like a higher bar for them, because I think we've seen now I think the bar has been raised in combining mechanism with theme, and really exploring, I think, new spaces, even if neither is completely out there, but really trying to not be content with just, yet another fantasy drafting game or yet another city building game. I think I mean, that's not to say that I won't make those games, because I think sometimes, it suits it. But on the other hand, if you've got a mechanism, I think I'll always push to see if it can be more, that it can it, so I'm also trying to collect lots of kind of theme ideas, I guess. So I'm currently obsessed with flavor and food, and I'm trying to see if I can make a card game all about combining food, but that makes sense scientifically. So what drives flavor in food? Why do certain foods go well with each other?
You're trying to be like the rat out of Ratatouille, then? Is that what you're trying to say to me? Basically,
or Heston Blumenthal or something, or yeah. But I think it's quite fascinating, and in a way, it really maps quite cleanly to kind of set. I mean, if you imagine, and what I'm really trying to work on is basically where you have a huge, a la Wingspan, you have a huge deck, all of which are different foods, and on each food that has some number of icons, and those icons kind of represent flavors. And of course, an icon will appear on different cards when they share that kind of flavor, and so that tells you that they go well together. And it's so direct, but it's exactly, it's kind of interesting that I mean, people, that it appears to be a very key difference between Western and Eastern cuisine, is that in the West, generally you want to have foods that have similar flavor profiles. So you want, if I have flavor A in this food, I want to match it with another food which also has flavor A. Whereas in Eastern cultures, generally, it's the opposite. You don't want matching flavors in foods to be put together. You want contrast, which is kind of which in itself is quite kind of interesting. From the same foods, there's some sort of fundamental difference in how you approach it. And I mean, it's still actually not particularly well understood. It's still a lot of work to be done, but it is fascinating. And even the simple act of now we didn't. People are going to be like, we're tuned in to listen about game design, not to hear about food. But what
These
happens
people
when
are just
you
going to have
cook
to wait.
meat.
These people are just going to have to wait. Anyway, smash. I mean, it's like there's other. If you want to listen to people talk about mechanics in games, there's other. As we said, we've already established there's tons of podcasts out there.
Well, this is going to make this one stand out, I guess.
Exactly. Anyway, you're talking about cooked meat.
Yes. Well, yes. No. Well, this is the last point, but something happens called the Meillard reaction, which is what happens when meat browns or cooks, basically. But I think it's something like 9 or 10,000 different chemical compounds are created or released during that process. And it's a different set of compounds depending on the meat, depending on the conditions, depending on the temperature. All of that, and that all goes into this sort of what we would say is cooked meat. So if you sort of it's sort of incredible the kind of complexity hidden in that one act of heating meat in different ways, and that's why you get this sort of incredible richness of flavor across all meats and depending on preparation. And whereas with vegetables you don't have that. There's not as many different flavor profiles depending on cooking. So yeah, fascinating. I can recommend this book. I'm just looking at it. It's called The Flavor Matrix. If anyone's interested, check it out.
I'll stick that in the show notes. If you give us the link, we'll put it into the show notes. I mean, going back to Wingspan, which was...
I should be getting some...
It was a strange... Yeah. No, it was a strange thing because it was kind of like the industry darling for a long time. And now I'm seeing a little bit of a backlash on it. Or I'm seeing a mixture of people saying, oh, it wasn't... I don't know if they were expecting some kind of big, huge... No, look at it this way. I'll say it again. I think they imprinted their own expectations onto the game and were either absolutely delighted with the final product or disappointed. I think certain people were expecting a very, very heavy game, and other people were expecting a kind of a system, like they were expecting something to run along the same lines as Scythe. And that's kind of got it. And I've seen different people kind of get things out of it, and I've seen kind of people kind of disappointed. Do you think, though, that with us starting to put a lot of games into the spotlight, do you think there's a danger that people will go after, designers will look to create certain designs based on popularity as opposed to based on them seeing a system that they believe is going to be kind of fun to play?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Yes, it is.
I mean, gosh, we can't pretend that you can't pretend that it doesn't already happen. I mean, like, I do it as well. I'm not I wouldn't call myself like an artist or something. I mean, there was something, I can't remember. Eric Lang has this sort of like 3 profiles of a game designer. You're either an artist, a rock star, or there's one other one. I can't remember the third one, unfortunately. But my point being is that I don't think I'm driven purely by creating something because I must create it, and I want to express something that is in my head, and I just have to sort of put it out there. It's a part of what I want to do, but another part is that I would like people to play it, and I would like people to hopefully enjoy it. And the moment you think about that, I mean, you are thinking about making something that's popular. I mean, on some level. And of course, publishers also have to think about it, unless you're sort of self-publishing. The moment you sell a game to a publisher, that also then starts becoming a concern. So I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we weren't saying that most game designers on some level are trying to make popular games. Now, they're trying to make games that they themselves also like, hopefully. Yeah. So they're not doing it instead of making something they enjoy. But, I mean, it's so difficult to get anyone to even play your game or to even hear about it. So I think, sure, even if there is some sort of backlash at the end, I mean, that's just because more people have heard about it. And in the end, I think you're still, any press is good press, I think, realistically. Especially in this case, because I think, I mean, I haven't read everything, but I've played Wingspan and I quite enjoy it. It's not my absolute favorite game in the world, but it's very solid, and it is in a kind of type of game I enjoy a lot. And it's a good game. So I think, all the criticism about expectations, that's one thing, but there's certainly not criticisms about the game itself in terms of the design and is a smooth experience? Is it, does it have all those sort of modern game design aspects? Is it, is it fair? Is it interesting? Is it beautiful? So I still think in the end it's still a resounding success, even if there are some loud critics, but that's just because it wasn't what they wanted it to be, and that's all.
Yeah, I think it's an expectation thing. I think over the actual execution, I don't think anybody can deny that the way the game was executed, it was executed extremely well. I think that people were expecting a certain game, and not everybody got that game that they were kind of expecting, especially. But I guess is there not that sense of it was a very, very difficult game to get a hold of, and therefore people were trying to justify to themselves that they've probably potentially tracked down the game, paid a lot of money for the game, and now they're sitting there saying, I hope I haven't just thrown X amount of money down the drain. With Chocolate Factory, okay, the hype machine on that was going for a long time, because I do remember Cesar speaking about it, while he was even talking about, other projects that he was running at the same time. Because people were like looking at the art, they were looking at the mechanics, and they were saying, well, this is really, people were getting excited about it. Did you feel any kind of pressure, additional pressure, when you must have seen kind of like the little bit of hype and the excitement that kind of went about the game. Whenever Cesar kind of put anything up on Facebook, folk were just commenting underneath and saying, I can't wait to play this looks amazing. Did that put a little bit of extra additional pressure on yourself, or were you at that point in your design bubble just focusing on getting everything kind of done?
Well, to be honest, I think I didn't feel any pressure. I mean, I'm really pleasantly surprised by the people who support Cesar and a lot of those people who comment on the posts and things. That it's a very friendly. He's built a kind of very friendly player base and community around him, and I think that's a really great feature of the company. And it's really difficult to do. It's really, really difficult to do because there are a lot of conflicts, and you can't. It's hard to manage. There is inevitably going to be things that don't work out, or backers who aren't happy with a game, but somehow through all that, I think he's strode a really good line, and you can see that in the really just positivity that's displayed by the people interested in the game. But I mean, more of the point was that I'd previously, it wasn't my first game that had gone on Kickstarter, and I'd had the experience with Monumental with Funforge the year before. Which we in the first time we launched it we had to stop the campaign. It wasn't going to be successful.
Yeah.
And then we were eventually successful later. And to be honest, if you compare the communities and the comments for that project, and similarly, they also did a lot of revealing of art and mechanisms, and they went, they traveled all around France, showing the game to people, and if you read those comments, some of the comments, you can see why I had no sense of concern or pressure from the people who are interested in that, because it just is kind of night and day. It's not a criticism. I mean, it's a small kind of minority, I'm sure, of the overall backers of Monumental, but because of the history that Funforge has had with Kickstarter, there are a number of people who are sort of got their pitchforks ready to go, unfortunately. And that's just not the case with Cesar and Alicat. And to his credit, that's not by chance that he's run a lot of really great campaigns and is really good at building a community. So no, I felt quite calm, actually, to be honest. I wasn't, wasn't even necessarily checking the project every day or anything, or I was sort of
I don't believe that for a second that you weren't kind of. There wasn't a little bit of
it's
F5
honest,
action.
Quite honest, though. No, honestly, there was definitely. I mean, Kickstarter campaigns a little bit, but it's kind of the start and the end that are the kind of big points. I think. I mean, the really nice thing was that I think that Cesar was also quite open to keep working on the game even during the Kickstarter, and that actually the community was also receptive of that, because sometimes you have the opposite reaction that people think, oh, the game's not finished, or why are you still working on it, or blah 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 blah. But actually, people were they were just excited what more we could put in the game.
Yeah,
and it was great to have that opportunity, and we it's a better game for it.
It is a strange situation because Kickstarter did used to be kind of like, people were happier to say, like, we're going to be working on the rules, we've got a couple of changes we might make to the art, we might do something different with the components, and people were like, well, this is an idea, it's going to kind of evolve. And there's a section of Kickstarter, unfortunately, which is kind of like, why are you trying to change this? Like you said, is this not finished? Why can I not see a finished rulebook? Why can I not have the 3D printer files to print my own version of the game, kind of
really,
thing? Yeah,
it's a difficult. I haven't kind of unpacked all my thoughts about Kickstarter, I guess. I mean, it's just it's obviously a big part of the industry now, and being someone who wants to sell games or make games, and it's inevitably going to be part of my future. But it is so much work goes into Kickstarter beyond just producing the game, and that kind of return on investment gets lower and lower and lower every year in terms of the amount of work. Not designers, publishers, everybody has to put into it, and it's I definitely don't fault anyone for finding it. It's just a difficult thing to do. But at the same time, you always look at the success stories and you go, wow, that was, when people raise $1 million or whatever, and that's great, for the company, hopefully, and that's a great boon, and it does allow games to exist that wouldn't have otherwise, or beautiful collector's editions, I think of like Tony's Snowdonia, for example, like with NKSN. Without Kickstarter, they'll never have a beautiful deluxe edition, which realistically is kind of what that game should have. That it has, this beautiful realization of the world and these different railways, and to have them all together in one box and to make new content, and that, that I quite like, that kind of these new, because it's not, I suppose it's not preying on people, this kind of, that fear of missing out or things like that. It's not preying so much on the hype. It's seeing excellent games that you want to have a new life, and how do you kind of improve them, and how do you, like just today or just this week, Cleopatra and the Society of Architects went back, like an old Days of Wonder game from Bruno Cathala and Ludovic Montblanc, and that's been upgraded and it's just, I think that's a really nice, from a designer point of view, it's that's great what can be achieved, and how far you can push the envelope with, creating beautiful objects that are still excellent games. It's just the process is increasingly taxing for all involved, and I don't know if it's fully appreciated. Again, I really think it is a minority. I'm certainly not. There's a huge majority of people who are incredibly supportive and very understanding. And of course, without them, these games wouldn't get made. But it's hard to ignore that vocal minority that makes it can make it difficult sometimes.
I think the other thing is as well is that we're ending up with flash in the pans in Kickstarter. Is that we're ending up with games that kind of are successful, are funded, get fulfilled, and then you never hear from them again. There isn't that kind of that. It's a fear I see with the video game industry that there's people that are talking about the right to essentially pirate video games so that they've got a copy of the original game, because otherwise what happens with kind of like these virtual consoles, and as video game platforms kind of die out, then the games that were available on those platforms, there's not an actual physical record of that game. You can't, there's entire swathes of games which just are lost to the annals of history and whatever because you can't play them. And the thing with board games is that, are we in this situation where we build so much on the hype machine and stuff like that, and the nature of Kickstarter is there's not such a retail tail, that you do get games that have 1,000 copies out there, and that's it. And they're fantastic games. They're highlights of the genre, but there's just no way to push them back to get the next retail tail, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, but isn't it great that they exist at all? I guess. I mean, it depends what you want to get out of it. I think, obviously making a game is one thing and Kickstarter is great for that, but it doesn't mean that you'll be able to make a company, for example, that you'll be able to keep making games or keep restocking games. That's a different skill set.
Yeah.
And it's, from a designer's point of view, I'm definitely tempted that I would love to be able to be a full-time game designer. And if I were to do that, Kickstarter would obviously be part of that. But it's, you are confronted also with the reality that, yes, you're making these, the standard of what is made now is so high across the board, but you also have to somehow reconcile that with all the time you put in. But it may just be 1,000 copies, and you have to kind of reconcile that with, is that enough for you? Is that are you happy with that? Because for 9 out of 10 games you make, that probably will be, what the reality is of it. So it's an interesting, it's an interesting thing. It makes you really think about why you're doing what you're doing, what you're trying to get out of it, what gives you joy in the whole process. But I'm still happy to be doing it. So
yeah, I mean,
I must be getting something.
Out of the games that you've been involved in, is if you could pick a game which was, say, the kind of the code names of your portfolio, the game that ended up kind of being seen and sold anywhere, out of the stuff that you've been involved in, is there any games that you would have said, well, I'd love this if this had gone kind of thermonuclear basically and spread anywhere?
Well, I think I would take any game going thermonuclear, but I mean there's two thoughts that come to mind. One is Elysium, which I sort of can't answer it with Elysium because it did do quite well actually, really, by all standards. I think it sold about 50,000 copies probably. But there's still a sad point with that, is that it was a kind of a game that, as I said, I love systems, and one of the things baked into that game is the fact that you can make more cards and more families, and it was set up that you would easily be able to mix them and create new experiences, new combinations, and that was sort of inherent to that. And, we designed a complete expansion of 8 gods, that would completely, kind of explode the variety, and it's sort of beyond, for me, it's beyond like replayability or variability, because in that game it's all about what is the specific combination of things that are available to you, and how they combine with each other is meaningful and meaningfully different. So I guess that is something that's just a small regret that, we never got to publish that expansion, which I think would have really shown off something that was really deeply put in the game, and that it would have really, I think, been relatively unique in kind of strategy card games like this, that it's really about what specific subset are you using and how does that change the experience. And I guess the only other game that really does come to mind a little bit is a game called Costa Rica.
Yes.
Which was published by Mayfair and Lookout. And it just never really, for whatever reason, I think maybe there's some expectations coming from Lookout. It's got Clemens Friend's artwork, which is amazing, and but it's not a heavy game. It's really a kind of a light family game. But it's just a really, I don't know, it's just really simple. It's just doing something just a little bit different, but people have so much fun when you see people playing it, and you still get comments about that it's just this real surprise for some people that you can play, that it allows you to be, horrible to your friends if you want, or you can just play very gently, and there's really nice interaction around the table, and again, in such a kind of relatively simple game, that you felt like maybe with it, I don't know, if things had been different, it could have reached quite a wide audience, because it really can be played by almost anybody. The concepts are so simple, and it just creates a lot of really fun moments, which I think is really important. So, yeah, I guess those would probably be the things that come to mind. But I, of course, I wish that all my designs, lived longer and were played more. And I think they are. I think if you ever feel down, I go maybe seems quite sad, but I go to old Board Game Geek pages and you read through some comments, and I usually sort by rank, so I don't read the low comments because that's not really going to help anybody, at least not going to help me. But it just reminds you that like that you. Because that's the other thing. Once you design a game, you don't really play it anymore. Actually, in fact, you stop playing it well before it's published normally. And seeing those comments reminds you that it's a thing that exists and that it's still being played now, and it still is delivering something that you can't ever know what it is. Because if you've created it, you never will enjoy it the same way as I think somebody who hasn't created it. And then to read that is really just really meaningful. So it's yeah, no, it's nice. There is still life, even if only one or two people playing. It's still meaningful.
What's your plans next? I mean, what have you got in the kind of the fire just now?
Yeah,
that people can kind of expect to see from you.
Yeah, it's going to be a good year, I think. So I have these adventure games with Cosmos, so it's co-designed with Phil Walker Harding. And they are just getting released in German now, and they'll be available in English later this year. So they're sort of a homage to old point-and-click adventure PC games. And it's
all right. Okay,
it's in the same format as the Exit series, also from Cosmos. So sort of that small box, about €10 a game, and so it's quite different in that you have, again, it's a cooperative experience, but it's not destructive, and it's not so much about puzzles. It's a lot more about story. You essentially have locations that you're exploring, and you use a book to refer to look at what you see, and you pick up items, and once you have items, you can use them at a particular location. You see what that happens by looking up in the book. And so, I mean, some of the things have been done before. You see, like, using items together, Unlock does that, for example, but this is all really, ultimately, it's about the story that is progressing and that you're discovering, and the choices that you make in that story. It's split into the two that are being released. You play generally about 3 sessions of 90 minutes each. It's also about, I guess, one of the things I really wanted to make was a game in the kind of narrative escape room kind of genre. I guess it's following along from that, but that asked the players to use their brains, like in a sort of in reality, if I have a hammer, what can I do with a hammer? What if I'm presented with all these different locations, all these different things I could use a hammer for? What makes sense? It's like those, exactly what you were thinking in point and click adventures. Like, I have this thing, where could I use it? What makes sense? What might happen? And I think that kind of complete freedom, I think, is captured in this. There really is such a wealth of ways you can combine things, and it rewards players for thinking, logically, and for thinking in character and in what would happen in the world, what makes sense. And that just reinforces a really great story. So hopefully players will agree. But yeah, so they're just getting released now. And if you're at the UK Games Expo, I'll be trying to demo some kind of early copies. I'll have sort of English translations of the German copies.
Oh, cool.
So if people want to check it out. And at the expo also, the Cosmos will release the English version of Roll for Adventure, which is a cooperative game with Brett Gilbert that was released last year in Essen in German. And it's kind of a family dice rolling cooperative game. Has a really nice kind of Yahtzee-esque kind of mechanism, but it's a lot about, you sort of carefully got to think about how each player's dice are managed, because, if all of your dice are trapped out on the board, then you can't do anything. So you have to kind of work together to try and not only complete different objectives, but to sort of manage each other's resources and try and get your teammates' dice back to them for their turn, so they can use them more effectively. And but all within a relatively simple roll and place kind of mechanism. So that's quite nice. I have a game called Ice Team, which is a 2-player game designed with Bruna Cathala. That's just being released in France now, and it'll hit the US and the UK later this year. So it's a 2-player game based on Chinese checkers originally. So it's a race where the polar bears, the very beautiful polar bear miniatures. So I'm not sure if people are aware of Jurassic Snack, which was a Bruna Cathala game.
Right.
So it's the same publisher. So they really know how to make beautiful components, and they have these absolutely amazing plastic polar bear miniatures with scarves that look like they're kind of like surfing almost across these ice floes. and it's a really beautiful kind of product. And it's so 20 minutes. A bit of an abstract game, but quite simple to play and quite variable. So that's I'm very happy with that one. And then there will be other stuff, but it hasn't been announced yet. So
just taking it easy then. Just
I mean, it's
just sitting back.
That's
just,
the case with games that
just producing, because that just sounds like you've just going.
Well, it sounds pretty bad, but my mother makes me keep a Google document where I keep all the details of all the games I've signed, just so that she can check in. And actually, sometimes I have to check it. I mean, I think it's just that things are always in different stages, and you sign things, and they take a few years to come to fruition. So, some games are much longer in the. For example, Chocolate Factory was first pitched to a publisher in 2013. For example, so some games take a very long time to come reality, whereas the adventure games, we had the first concept Christmas a year and a half ago. So that actually has been very rapid, relatively. So yeah, it's I think I enjoy it. I get to work with it's a lot easier when you work with good people. You notice that I don't really make many games by myself, so I get to kind of make double the number of games with the same amount of effort. Although I don't think that's really true, but it's I definitely benefit from that. It's something I really enjoy.
So would you continue then if you didn't have the people around you? If people were still, if they were saying like, well, there's going to be another Matt Dunstan game coming out, if it was just you by yourself, I take it you wouldn't do the Kickstarter stuff yourself. You would prefer to be working in a kind of a team kind of situation rather than, I've seen it because I see it more and more. I've actually seen it with Alley Cat Games. Kind of a lot of the stuff that they've been working in have been kind of collaborations.
Yeah, I think I would never self-publish any of my games. I would always sell them to a publisher and then obviously collaborate with them to make it. And whether they want to use Kickstarter or not, that's up to them. I don't know. I just find the process is when I find the right people to work with, it's just easier because you just widen the amount of skills that are present to sort of get a design to the finish point. It's not really about that it's sort of a doubled effort necessarily. It's just that, if you have more people working on a game, the chances are that, you'll find exactly the right fix for something, or that you'll think about something, or you'll have the particular skill that you need. It just kind of ensures that you finish more projects, I think. And that's kind of the reason that I've been able to make so many games, is that, with these partnerships with other designers means that, you just have a lot more chance to finish things. And that's what you've got to do. And I love explore. I'm really bad at it, and maybe some of my collaborators will be listening to this and cursing me because I haven't worked on the game that we're supposed to be working on together. But I love when I meet new designers, and I love the work they do. I want to work on something with them, even if I have no idea what the game is. That for me is just kind of exciting, just exploring. How does another person think about games? What's important to them? What excites them? And you always get something different. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't always work. It doesn't always work as, there are sort of degrees of efficiency and degrees of kind of inspiration but I'm still happy with the results, no matter how long it takes, or even if sometimes a game, never comes together, or an idea never happens. So that's a lot of fun. I love traveling. One of the most fun things I've been able to do a little bit is to go and visit people for, a weekend or 3 or 4 days and stay with them. I've stayed with Bruno Cathala at his place a few times. And, we just kind of talk, and sometimes we work on designs, or we just play other games, or just enjoy life. He has a very sort of laid back approach to designing, actually. And, I go to other people, like, I visited Adam Porter, of Pakoko fame, in Wales, and I've never been to Cardiff, so it's this amazing, it's not a bad life that you get to travel to a new city, experience that, meet some new people, deepen, friendships, and kind of get to work on something you really love that also is kind of work, so it has the potential to, you're still, forwarding that part of things. So no, that is incredibly, just a nice way of doing things. So in my opinion.
So, I mean, it sounds like you've got an awful lot of stuff kind of going on, and it also doesn't sound like you're going to be kind of disappearing off into the cardboard sunset kind of any time kind of soon.
No. You have to put up with me for a while yet. I might be moving maybe from the UK this year, but I'm already sort of thinking about how can I, where I move, how can I fit up new collaborations. For example, I probably will be moving to Prague, and I've sort of been thinking, well, Wolfgang Warsch is only a few hours away in Vienna, so maybe that's maybe we can try and make something together.
Exactly.
I've actually met him before. He used to come to the Cambridge Playtest group for a few years.
Oh right, okay.
He lived in the UK. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. He was a really nice guy, but of course, I don't know if it was our bad influence, but he came up with all the games that we now know in the summer immediately after he left Cambridge. So maybe, I don't know whether it was, we were sort of suffocating him or something. But he's absolutely
exactly.
Nice, so, yeah.
You inspired me to go somewhere else.
Yes.
Basically. Thank you very much for
my pleasure.
For coming on. Pleasure. If people want to keep an eye on everything that you're going to be up to, and I'm surprised you'll get a chance to even sleep, where can we find you on the internet webs?
Yeah, probably the best place is Twitter. So I'm at wisegoldfish, all one word, on Twitter. That's probably where I sort of keep most things up to date. And I have a website which is, well, who knows, when somebody listens to this in a year, so it's matthewdunstan.com/games. And maybe by the time some listeners listen to this in, a year's time, it will have been updated properly to be a good summary of what I'm doing. But currently it's a rather sorry state of affairs. So if you want to have a laugh at how terrible, my attempts were, trying to keep that updated, then go to that. And of course on Board Game Geek, if you look at my designer profile, then you'll see all the kind of games that have been announced or are being talked about. So yeah.
I'll definitely make sure we put a link to that particular beauty in the show notes then, won't we?
Yes. Well, that will be something to. It's something like an archaeology. I mean, I almost don't want to get rid of it because I used to try and make a post every day of a new game design, and I kind of got up to 70, so I didn't do too badly. But yeah, it's a reminder of another time.
If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, we're on kind of all different types of places, worn out faces, worn out places. You can find us on Twitter, you can find us on Facebook, you can find us on Instagram, and you can find us on our website if you just simply search for We're Not Wizards in Google. If you want to read what we've written, go to we'renotwizards.blogspot.com. If you want to look at some frankly scary nightmare fuel videos that have got my face in them, then go to YouTube and search for We're Not Wizards Tabletop Podcast when you'll find us there. You'll find us on all the podcast catchers, all the things that have got pod in them, all the things that have got cast in them, and Spotify, which has got neither of them in it at all, because they just like to be contrary. If you have liked what you've listened to tonight, there's a couple of things you can do. Tell someone else. That's always nice. Or you can go into Apple Podcasts, and if you go to Apple Podcasts, drop us a subscription, drop us a rating, or even drop us a review. If you are going to give us a rating or a review, then make sure that you please don't give us 10 stars, because it just makes me big-headed. But don't give us 1 star, because I just get a little bit upset when people do that type of thing, and you don't want to see me cry. It's just not some place you want to go. But give us 5, because it's in the middle. It's average, and we are just a little bit average. But the person who's not been average tonight is rather wonderful. They're rather fantastic. They're rather prolific. You know, nail this man down before he designs something else, for goodness sake. So rather wonderful, rather fantastic, Mr. Matthew Dunstan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. My absolute pleasure. And well, hopefully here's to another, 200X episodes, and I'll come on again before you give it all up.
I'll be in prison.
In prison, okay. We can still podcast.
You can. I can still use my hour a week. There's only 2 more things to do. The first thing is to remember we're many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Matthew?
You're not wizards. We're not wizards.
Okay. And you? Don't let me down. Are you a wizard?
No, I'm certainly not a wizard, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much. And the other thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Matthew. Say goodbye, Matthew.
Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for listening. And thanks to you, Richard.
You're very, very welcome indeed. And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe, roll 6s, make something awful. And until the next time, goodbye.
Bye.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.